talk about fear, because fear is your coaching. So like we used to think that this was a coach, right? When we thought of the word coach, we thought about sports.
Hey Dennis, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good.
Yeah.
Did you had a good trip to England?
Yeah, it was fun. We were kind of lucky, I guess, depends how you look at it, I guess, to be there with all the pomp and circumstances of the Queen's funeral. Um, that was pretty wild. We were able to walk a little bit from our daughter's house to where the hearse went by on on the road on its way to Windsor Castle. So that was pretty cool. I felt like a very historic moment.
Yeah,
And
true. I didn't think about that.
yeah, they come down. They left. So Westminster Abbey and Parliament, all that stuff is kind of downtown London on the Thames River, and then Windsor Castle is west of London. And so they chose to drive on, I would consider, back roads. They didn't drive like on the main interstates or anything like that. So they went pretty slow, and the whole route was lined by people, which I thought was pretty cool. Um, and we were able to get within about, I would say, I don't know how far we were, very close, and we could easily see it and get a picture of it and all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Historic time in the life of England, I guess, right?
Yeah,
So anyway, that's so yeah, so that was pretty cool. And we basically just stayed around London and had a good time. And the grandson is 2, almost 3, and so he's a piece of work. That's all I can say. He loves to dress up as a soldier at Buckingham Palace, where he marches around. He's got a black fuzzy hat and a red t-shirt that looks like a uniform top, and he marches around his house with a little drum and no expression on his face, and just keeps going around in a circle marching. It's really funny.
that's really funny.
Oh, he's only 2, and his father cleaned out a little closet where they had a vacuum cleaner stored, and took the vacuum cleaner out, and he stands in the closet like it's his guard shack. Just looks at you like, yep, here I am.
That's
I
funny.
am guarding this place. So anyway, it's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How's everything with you? School going well?
Yeah, it's been good. Staying busy. Senior year, got a couple projects I'm working on and looking for a job, looking into master's programs, stuff like that.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, so classes are kind of the least thing on my mind.
Yeah, that's typical, I think, for seniors. So
Yeah.
I don't even, I know in high school it's a real problem getting kids to show up for class, right?
Yeah, senioritis is real bad.
Same thing in college, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I guess we've got a little bit of a group here. Got Bob and Ashley and Julian. How y'all doing today?
Great.
All
I'm
right.
awesome. Thanks. How are
Yeah,
you?
I guess all right. I'm really not sure. I'm still got jet lag.
Oh, yeah.
It just I'm, as I get older, the harder that is to kind of deal with. So anyway, it's fine though. So well, thanks everyone for coming. What we're going to do is we're going to finish the second part of the um, EQ for entrepreneurs, which I personally really like and use this quite a bit in my just regular life. Hey, Denise, how are you? And
Back.
good. Um, So we'll get started with that. Let me do the share screen thingy. See if I can get this going. There we go. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go over the one, managing your fears, again, and then we have 3 more for today.
Let's talk about fear, because fear is a reality. When you're an entrepreneur, fear is everywhere. Let's talk about fear, because fear is a reality. When you're an entrepreneur, fear is everywhere. I don't believe a great company can be built on fear, but I do believe that a great company, in fact, most great companies, maybe every great company, is built by people that felt fear and worked through it. So what do we feel fear about? So Harvard Business Review actually did a study where they identified 7 specific and repeated buckets of fear that are felt by entrepreneurs. Okay, so the basic one is financial insecurity. It's really risky doing a startup, right? You're not building your 401k. The second one is running out of money, right? The most common fear of entrepreneurs, we're not gonna outlast our cash on hand. You know, we're not gonna be able to make it. We've got 7 weeks, we're running towards a wall. The third one is imposter syndrome. It's the idea that I've tricked people into giving me money. They think I'm someone that I'm not, and I actually can't do it. And I'm gonna get found out. The next one is that the idea is no good. I've convinced people that this really great idea, you know, is gonna change the world, and I'm not sure I 100% believe it right now. And then there's the shame or embarrassment factor. You know, what is it gonna be like when I have to, you know, tell everyone the company blew up and that I failed? You know, I can't even stomach that feeling of imagining what that's gonna be like. Then
I just want to take a second here, and we'll come back to this, just to tell you all a story that illustrates this point pretty well. So back when I was with James Madison University, I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley in San Francisco with people who had some connection with the university. Either they had graduated or whatever. And I met this really interesting guy at this one place. And I can't remember his title. It was something like vice president of sales or something like that at a company that I had never heard of at that time. You may have heard of it. It's a company called Marketo, which is a marketing software kind of company. And so I was just, you know, talking to him. I didn't know him. He was probably 10 years behind me at JMU, maybe more than that, maybe 20 years. I'm not even sure. But we started talking about what it takes to run a startup, work for a startup, that whole thing. And this subject of embarrassment and, you know, if you fail, what happens? He had a really interesting outlook on it, which I had not heard before. And he goes, the first thing he said was, here in Silicon Valley, if you start a company and it becomes very, very successful and it's your first company, even if you make $1 billion, you will not be invited to any event or to speak because everyone thinks you were just lucky. So you have to do it again. So if you do it a second time, then it appears to be skill and you have a better chance. But this is what he said that really blew me away. He said, I am here, I am on my 15th startup, 15. And I've gone bankrupt 5 times. You know, I've had all these things happen. And here in Silicon Valley, that's what's expected. If you try and fail, you keep trying. Now, he goes, when I lived in Boston and worked in Boston, at the time, which was a while ago, he said, when he was looking at doing a startup, an investor said to him, if you fail, you will never work in this town again. That's what the investor told him. So that was Boston. Similar experience in the Washington, D.C. area, similar experience in Chicago, where the mentality was, you know, if you lose money, if this doesn't work out, you're a loser, you're going to be in big trouble. Not true out there. So 15 startups, right? And he's sitting there. So about 2 or 3 years later, something like that, I'm not sure, could have been 5. I was reading one of the tech newsletters, and I saw where in the meantime, he had become president or CEO of Marketo. And it, in fact, was bought by Hewlett Packard for several $billion. So he finally had his big success. And now he's the managing partner of Goldman Sachs in San Francisco, does all kinds of stuff. But I just want to point out that it was 15 tries for this guy before he, quote, made it. And that just blew my mind. I had never heard of anything like that. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that story. And now we'll go back to this. Let's see if I can figure out how to share my screen again. Okay, there we go. Got it. Okay, there we go.
There's the team, I didn't hire the right people. They're not going to be able to do it. I don't have the right people around me to execute. And finally, the opportunity cost, that big corporate job that you didn't take where you would have been building your 401k, and I'm never going to get it back. And I got myself off the path, and see, now I'm spinning. Like, I am getting upset just talking about this stuff because I have been there, and I was that founder, and I mean, I had all of this. It's real and it's no fun. But here's the thing, fear is not all bad, right? I don't want to say that all fear is bad. Fear can be a great driver, right? If you're saying, I got to work hard, I need to figure out my sales channels before I run out of money, or you're going, I got to hit my goal this week because that's what I said I was going to do, like that can be really, really motivating. It can drive progress and learning. But here's the thing, it's incredibly damaging when fear becomes physical. When you experience fear as a physical sensation, it stops you from being able to be effective. You're tense. Your heart rate goes up, like your breathing increases, like your blood vessels constrict, right? Your mental focus, becomes insanely sharp. So this is the classic fight or flight response, and that is driven by your amygdala. Your brain is going, what do I need to do to stay safe? So how do you think that is going to affect your ability to make good decisions? So the fact is, you cannot build a great team or a company or even have a good day when you're feeling like that. So when you become aware that you're in that feeling, you're having those physical fear sensations, just stop, just slow everything down. Don't make any decisions. You got to address that, back to sort of the idea of being in the red, right? If you've got that level of fear, you're in the red. Go back to your presence tools, go for a walk, get outside, do something physical. You can talk to your team. I personally find that when I say how I'm feeling, it cuts it in half at least, if not more, right? It's a little bit like, it's not that the fear isn't real. The fear is real and it's rational, but it also reminds me a little bit of the monster under the bed, and when mom and dad comes in and looks under the bed and the monster's not there, the kid feels better, right? So it's a little bit like that. When you share it, it kind of, fear hates the light of day, so if you're feeling that way, you share it with someone else, it's gonna help you lessen it. If there's no one that you feel like you can really talk to about it, which sometimes happens to CEOs because you don't want to say to your team that you feel afraid because you feel like you need to build confidence. You can always also, by the way, I would encourage you to say it to them anyway, because you're going to be, they're not going to be freaked out. Your team's going to be glad that you shared with them. So if you are a CEO and you are worried about showing your fear and vulnerabilities to your team, think about it. If you decide to do it, you're going to get a lot of value out of it. But you can also write it down. Sometimes just writing things down sucks the power out of them. And, coach yourself. Just ask yourself a simple question. What's the one thing that matters right now? And that can sort of help you get back on track. The point is not to stop feeling fear or to imagine that you're ever going to get to a point that you're not going to feel it, because you will not. By starting a company or deciding you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've put yourself in a place where you're going to feel more fear probably than even the average person. The point is to recognize when it shifts from working for you to working against you, and then to manage it. So I love to say, feel the fear and do it anyway. The most powerful leaders are those who acknowledge and embrace their fear and then turn it into an asset. Okay, so this is like my favorite section. We're going to talk about flexible thinking. So you decided to work on this new thing and you had a plan. It was probably like an amazing plan. But as Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. The one thing we know for sure about your plan is that it is wrong. Your plan is wrong, your financial projections are wrong. Whether things turn out great for your company or blows up, it's not going to be what you thought. The fact is, what you know about your business is a tiny fraction of everything that there is to know. So if you know this much about your industry and your business and your competitors and your customers and your company, there's another 95% out there that you don't know. If everything was known, somebody would have already done what you're doing right now. So you made your plan with only 5% of the available information. Of course your plan is wrong. And that does not mean it is a bad plan or that you are not smart. The number one thing that highly intelligent people have in common is that they're wrong a lot. Jeff Bezos said that. So to be an entrepreneur, you have to get great at being wrong. You can call it growth mindset, you can call it learning mindset, but today we're calling it flexible thinking. So what are the elements of flexible thinking? So there's this cliche, strong opinions loosely held. People like to make fun of this on Twitter, but it's a cliche for a reason, and that's because it's really useful. So strong opinions means that you have a point of view and you're moving in a direction, right? You have to do that. If you're not moving in a direction and you haven't made a commitment, you're circling the drain. Loosely held means you're willing to abandon your strong opinions in the face of evidence to the contrary. You are taking a hypothesis-driven approach. You have beliefs about your business, you're moving in a direction, you test your beliefs, you talk to customers, you get data. And if the data shows your hypothesis was wrong, you don't go looking for better data. You say thank you, and you change your plan and you go test the next thing. This involves a total detachment from needing to be right. As an entrepreneur, you have to stand in the mirror practicing saying, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, over and over and over and over again until it's just as comfortable for you as saying hello. The core skill early in your company is learning. You got to also be comfortable in a state of just not knowing, which, by the way, I hate that, right? I'm a J, like I want to make a decision, like I just want to get there, I want to know. I hate not knowing. But that's really the definition of being a founder, is just being comfortable with the unknown. And then what is going to get you through this, and the key to success, is a commitment to asking continually better questions. The questions that you're trying to answer determine what you're going to be working on, and that is going to determine how quickly you're going to make progress in your business. So what are good questions? Good questions are sometimes called powerful questions because they generate thinking as opposed to generating a simple answer. They can't be answered yes or no, and they may have many different possible answers. A powerful question invites creative thinking and questioning of assumptions. So you might be sitting with your team and saying, who thinks we should start charging our beta customers? That's a question that you could ask. It's not a very powerful question because it's just asking for a yes or no, and it's not prompting a discussion. A better question on that topic would be, what might happen if we start charging our customers? So now imagine the conversation you're going to have if you ask that second question. It's going to put you into a conversation that's going to invite creative thinking. Powerful questions are universal. So you can just have this toolkit of questions and you can just bring them out with you. They apply to lots of situations. When you get really good at flexible thinking, these questions will become second nature to you. You know, like, what's working, right? I love to ask like positive questions rather than negative questions. When you focus on what's not working, it takes your brain into a negative place. But if you ask what's working, you know, one thing to say is what's working and how can we do more of it, right? And that takes you into a positive generative place. Another one that I love to ask is what's at stake here? Because when you name the stakes, you know, behind a decision, it can tell you, you know, how essential is this? And if you're worrying about something where the stakes actually aren't that big, asking what's at stake here can cause you to let that question go and focus somewhere else. So just like we looked at the profile of the person who isn't self-aware and we thought about like how bad it would be to work for that person or with that person, Here's another frame on that, which is thinking about being in a fixed thinking mindset or a judgmental mindset versus a flexible thinking mindset. And I want to, like, again, just point out that these are states of being. They're not kind of absolutes. So we all spend time over here in fixed, and we all spend time over here in flexible. So fixed people are feedback avoiders. They've got their story. So you may have been in a meeting or seen someone in a meeting when they're pitching or they're presenting, and they go into it like a fight. What they're trying to do is convince you that their point of view is right. So if someone asks a question, the purpose of answering the question is to knock down the assumptions, right? Whereas if you go into a meeting with a different kind of flexible attitude and someone asks you a question, where you can go is curiosity. Like, oh, what a great question. I hadn't thought about that before. Let me respond and kind of engage with you on the question that you've just asked. It's just a completely different approach. Where do you think fear puts you? Fear puts you over there. Ego, needing to be right, puts you over there. Fatigue, being triggered, puts you over there, right? So we all get over there, and we need to work to get back over here. And how do you think it affects the rest of your team? It is not surprising that flexible thinkers are much more effective leaders. Flexible thinkers build loyalty, build trust, they're able to show humility, and they engender cooperation and a greater taking of risk by everyone on their team because they create a safe space for that to happen. So we're never going to be there 100%, but the more time we can spend in flexible thinking than fixed thinking, the better everything is going to be. So let's talk about feedback. Who loves to get feedback? I love that. A lot of people that love to get feedback. Unfortunately, feedback has picked a pretty bad rap. If you're getting feedback, a lot of people think it's because you did something wrong. You're broken, and I have to fix you by giving you some feedback that's going to make you better. So like in the context of being an entrepreneur, and actually just like in the context of life, like we need to flip this on its head. Feedback is a positive. Feedback is learning. Feedback is growth. So when you're getting feedback, you don't have to agree with everything that's being said, but flexible thinkers, like we just saw, are open to feedback and look for the learning opportunity in it. So, one of the reasons why we don't love feedback is because it feels like evaluation, but actually evaluation is only one of the three kinds of feedback. And it might be actually the least important, especially in this context. So there are three kinds of feedback, and they're appreciation, evaluation, and then coaching. So let's talk about appreciation first. Appreciation is feedback, right? And you should just hand it out. Just give it out like candy. In fact, give it out more than candy. It's better for you than candy. So, when people are doing things around you, that are helpful, like notice them, right? Just show people that you notice them and care. I'm not talking about like the culture of giving everyone a trophy. I'm just talking about the culture of we're all working really hard. Let's take a minute and just thank each other and acknowledge, right? That feels really good. It's not evaluative. It's just saying thank you. You should also be doing evaluation on a regular basis with your team. People should have a defined job description and goals that they need to meet, and you're going to want to check in every once in a while, 3 months or 6 months against those goals and kind of track and see how people are doing. But what I'm talking about now is like the kind of feedback that sort of happens on a daily basis that's just meant for growth. It's not evaluative and it's not pure appreciation, it's coaching and growth feedback. So how do you become great at getting and giving feedback? So one of the ways is you ask for it, right? The best kind of feedback is the kind of feedback that you asked for. What did I do well in that meeting that we just got out of? Like what didn't go so well? Ask someone for feedback right in the moment and then you'll be able to incorporate it right away. But make sure you're ready. So if you're feeling triggered or you're feeling a little upset or off, not a great time to get feedback. When you're getting feedback, practice active listening. So you're not going to argue, you're not going to speak. Don't question the content, question for understanding. So remember that it's hard to give feedback. So like have some empathy for the person who you've asked for the feedback, because that's a difficult place for them to be. And remember also, this is an exchange. So it's not like you've asked me for feedback, I'm telling and you're listening. We're having a conversation. Then you might check for understanding. So what I'm hearing you say is that you didn't think that I handled the market sizing question well, that you thought that my answer sounded defensive, right? You want to check and make sure that what the other person said is the same as what you heard. Once you're pretty sure you're clear on what the feedback was, say thank you, accept it, and go away. You can decide later what you're going to do about it and how you're going to address it. And it may take a while for it to sink in. And then on the flip side, when you're giving feedback, before you give it, make sure the person that you're going to give it to actually wants it. I noticed something in there I'd like to share with you. Is this a good time for us to talk about that? Right? And when you're giving someone feedback, you don't want to, you want to share your observations as opposed to your judgment, right? So you want to really stay with, this is what I saw, this is what I observed, this is what I noticed. It's up to the person getting the feedback to make the interpretation. You don't want the feedback to come across as, you should be more like this, you should be more like that. You just want to share what you observed and let them learn from it. So if you've got trouble with feedback, practice. I think it's great to practice on things that are not very loaded. Ask for feedback on, how your presentation skills were, or how your meeting agenda was, or something that's kind of not very deep and personal. If there's certain people you don't want to get feedback from because they just trigger you, that is totally fine. If there's certain topics that are off the table, that is also totally fine. You should work to expand on it. Again, back to that whole idea of expanding the boxes and reducing your blind spot. The more feedback you get, the smaller your blind spot's going to get. Some people like to have mantras. I know someone who actually repeats in his head before he gets feedback, feedback is growth, feedback is growth, feedback is growth, so that he can kind of calm himself down so that he can hear what's being said. Whatever is your trick for managing it, just look for what's true, the 10% that's true, and if you don't like the rest, you don't have to take it. The truth is that high-performing entrepreneurs, teams, and cultures are all feedback seekers. So especially if you're leading a team, the first step is for you to model asking for feedback and then also responding to feedback in a positive and a thankful way. We're going to talk about coaching. We used to think that this was a coach, right? When we thought of the word coach, we thought about sports. And now we think that this is a coach. A coach is Wendy Rhodes in Billions, designed to get the top performance out of the traders. But we're not talking about either of those kind of coaches today. Today, we're talking about growth coaching. So what is coaching exactly? Coaching is focused on questions and focused on the future. It is definitely not therapy. Okay, we're not going to be doing therapy with the people that we work with or even our family members. Therapy is backward looking and helps shed light on problems and patterns and what the causes may have been in the past. It's also not consulting, which is about evaluating problems and recommending solutions. And it's not really mentoring. Mentoring is about, someone who has more experience, sharing their experience, to help someone who's less experienced. By sharing wisdom. So coaching is future-focused and question-based. So if you're a manager, you're leading a team at a startup, you definitely need to spend some time over here, but you want to spend as much time as possible over here, because that is how you're going to help your team get on a steep growth curve so that the company can grow faster. The more effective your team comes at solving problems by themselves, as opposed to going to you for the solution, the better you're all going to be. If you're an entrepreneur, you get very used to, when you're a solo entrepreneur, kind of doing everything yourselves and having all the answers. And it's really, really hard to, when you have a team, not to just treat them as an extension of yourself that's going to enable you to be more efficient by taking things off your to-do list and putting it on theirs. That's not going to get the best kind of mileage and results out of your team. And frankly, it's not going to make them feel very happy and fulfilled. So if you can get out of that mindset and have them own their own workflow and their own decision making and empower them by being a coach as opposed to an instructor and a list giver and an order giver, your team's going to be so much more happy. The other thing is we all need to grow. Everyone wants to grow. And research shows that sustainable growth on a personal level has to be internally generated. So if you want to be an effective coach for your team, you have to kind of unlearn that skill of just telling people what to do and, get into a position where you can really lean back and let them find solutions. So coaching is a relationship between two people, any two people, in which the coach supports the coachee to make a meaningful change. It's future looking, it's aspirational, and most importantly, it is owned and directed by the person who is receiving the coaching. Here's a quick methodology that anyone can use to coach someone else on a specific issue. We're just going to call this spot coaching because this could just be a 10-minute conversation. So who can you coach? Anyone. You can coach your child, you can coach your parent, you can coach your team members, you can coach your employees, you can coach anyone who asks, and exactly 0 people that don't ask you, right? So if the person you want to coach who you think needs coaching doesn't buy into it, non-starter. So what's a coachable issue? So like anything for this purpose, sort of anything where personal growth and work kind of intersect. So this could be career development, it could be time management, it could be stress, work relationships, leadership style. It doesn't have to be like a big thing to be a coachable issue. Like a great coachable issue that comes up all the time is like, I'm constantly late to meetings. What can I do about that? Or, I want to get to inbox 0 is a coachable issue. So anything can be the way into a coachable issue. So you can have a coachable conversation in like 10 minutes. Like this could be 7 questions. So a great starting point is what's on your mind. Then I love to ask the question, and what else? Because usually the first thing someone says isn't actually the issue. You can keep digging by saying, what's the real challenge for you? So it's kind of like you're going level deeper and a level deeper and a level deeper. Asking what you want, like this might feel obvious, but sometimes like by asking this question, you can help people discover what they really want, which they might not even be aware of. So they might be looking at a problem from the outside and not really know where they're even coming from until they hear you ask that question. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? This is helping people understand their choices and how they value different things. So you're not telling them what choice to make. You are helping them uncover the unconscious decisions when they're choosing one thing over another. And then the final question is great because you're asking for feedback. When you ask someone what was most useful to you, you're saying, what did I do that helped you? Like, help me be better at doing this in the future. So, we all feel pressure to get stuff done and to have the answer. So it's like really tempting to jump in with advice and solutions or like share your own experience. If you really want to coach someone, don't do that, okay? I've done this so many times. I've made this mistake, right? I'll come in because I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. I've been there, and you want to like share and connect. You'll see the person's eyes, it's like the curtains came down, right? Because now you're not talking about them and helping them do the work. You're sharing about yourself. You'll be just amazed at how much more powerful an experience this is if you can stay out of sharing your own experience and just really lean back instead of leaning forward. Coaching is not just a process like we just went through. It's also just a way of being. There's actually a great book called The Coaching Mindset, which talks about this, and it's about kind of bringing a coaching perspective to everything that you do. So the essence of being a coach starts with presence, right? It all comes back to presence. So like literally just being there, fully present and really listening. Then, having an empathic stance. Like, do you hold everyone that you work with and the person that you're speaking with in unconditional positive regard? Are you really listening? Are you listening to either fix, solve, or critique? Emotional engagement, like, is your level of emotional engagement appropriate? Like, if somebody tells you something that is deeply upsetting, you should be connecting with what they're feeling, right? You're not detached, you're engaged. Boundary awareness, so understanding like what is theirs to fix versus yours to fix, right? And really kind of drawing a clear boundary so that you're not solving someone else's problem. And finally, like the courage to challenge. When someone says something that doesn't ring true or where you feel like they're not being honest with themselves, having the courage to call time out and say, that doesn't sound quite right, can be really, really powerful. Sometimes people need that. They need you to challenge them. So if there's one thing to take away from this idea of coaching, it's moving away from fix, tell, solve. And you need to spend some time there, right? We're all trying to move fast, but the more you can stay and ask, listen, reflect, like the better everything is going to be for you and your team. And when we kind of go up back to the level of sort of overall emotional intelligence, your job as an entrepreneur and as a leader is not to have answers. Your job is to have questions. And your legacy, it might not be creating the next unicorn company. Like for most of us, that's not going to happen. But what will definitely happen is that you are going to have an impact on everyone you work with and on everyone around you. And so developing your EQ will help ensure that that impact is a positive one. Thank you.
Okay. I'll be curious to get any feedback that people have about this whole idea of emotional intelligence and its importance. And also I at the very end there where she says that even if you aren't necessarily the founder of the next big thing or a huge success, at a minimum, you will have impact on everyone that you work with. And those of you who are older like me know that that follows you through your entire life, your entire business life. I am still talking to and working with people that I've known now for 40 and 45, 50 years. And some of them come from a long time ago when I worked. My first job was with Dun & Bradstreet as a credit analyst, which is about as far from being an entrepreneur as is humanly possible. But I'm still friends with several of those guys who actually stayed there for a career. So anyway, just want to open it up and see what you think. Denise, what do you think?
I really, really liked walking through those steps of what to do when fear happens. Because I was spinning a little bit yesterday. So this was very, very timely. And then I really like this spot coaching idea of just like boom, 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 those 5 or 6, 7 things. And then reminding that to stay out of sharing your perspective or your experience. Really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And thank you for just that little vignette that you shared of the guy who failed 15 times or had 15 different opportunities to start a business.
Oh, no, he failed 15 times.
Oh, did he? Okay.
He'll be the first one to tell you.
But the difference between Boston and DC and then Silicon Valley, fail fast. That's probably where that came from. But some of what I was spinning about yesterday was I'm not afraid to go get another job if I need to get another job if Togame doesn't make it. What was having me spinning yesterday was some of the well, what would I say and what would I do and blah, 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 because the general populace doesn't have much tolerance for a failure.
Yeah,
So,
it's true.
yeah.
The other thing I think it's important to understand that, when you point out that the general public doesn't have a tolerance for failure, they also are incredibly jealous. They're incredibly fear, the reactions come out in different ways. But if you really, I learned a question in training a long, long time ago. You all probably know this too. But when somebody says to you, whether it's a customer, a prospect, an angry person, whatever, and they say something to you I think your product's terrible, or whatever it is, whatever that first thing that they say is, what you say to them is, I understand what you're saying. In addition to that, is there anything else on your mind? And I cannot tell you the number of times that I have had incredible success, especially in sales, when I have used that process. And what I learned is that people will generally say what they think they're supposed to say, right? So if they're, in a situation where, everyone they know is negative and makes criticism, then they'll be negative and say criticisms. But you might find out with a little bit of prying that it's actually something completely different and unrelated.
Say it again.
So the very first, no matter what the person says to you, says, I like your hair, I hate your product. It doesn't matter what the first thing is. The very first thing that you say is, I understand what you're saying. In addition to that, is there anything else on your mind? I'll just give you one quick story. I don't want to get into all the weeds of the detail, but I was in a one-on-one meeting with the most fearsome CEO and scary individual at that time in my industry, my world, or whatever. And he was the CEO of a real big company that you all know and have heard of. In fact, he was the founder of it. And he had called me through his underlings to this meeting, and it was just me and him. It was a giant company, very unusual to have a meeting like this. And he basically sat at the other end of the table and glared at me, is what he was doing, right? So I kind of sat there, and finally he said something like, oh, I understand you're working with my executives on such and such. And my response to him was, yes, I understand what you're saying. In addition to that, is there anything else on your mind that you're thinking of today? And you know what it was? He wanted a retirement plan for his sister, who was a nun and had taken a vow of poverty, and wanted me to help him figure out how to get money to his sister legally from this massive corporation. That's what was on his mind. Now, you could have put me in an electric chair and asked me, what do you think? Why do you think that Bill asked you to come today? That would never have come back as a response. That's just
my word.
Yeah, one example. I can't tell you. It's happened to me 1,000 times. You can even do it just for fun. It sounds a little bit manipulative, but just try it. Just talking to someone, if you're talking about a touchy subject, anything. And if you phrase it just that way, I understand what you're saying, or I understand how you feel, however you want to phrase it. In addition to that, is there anything else on your mind today that you would like to talk about? It will blow you away. And depending on your relationship with that person or your positioning in the market or whatever, it might be, like, damn, I wish you'd make a vanilla chocolate chip, right? Or it could be, I got diabetes and how I can't eat your stuff anymore. What the hell am I going to do, right? It's all over the place. So I just encourage you to consider that. So
Great. I'm going to tag back on one thing you said, that people are incredibly jealous. I wonder if that's actually what drives when I'm saying that there's not much tolerance for failure. I wonder if it's driven by the fact that they're jealous. And so if you fail, then it's easier for them to see, I didn't want them to succeed anyway. I guess that's getting into
it's kind of like prisoners in jail, right? Like I know this one story. This guy was a truck driver for, I don't know if it was UPS, something like that. And he decided that he was going to quit and become a full-time farmer, which I guess his dad or grandfather had been. So the entire office started a pool about how long it would take to fail and come back to his job. 100 people. Now, he didn't go back. He's very successful, didn't go back. But that's a perfect example. Those guys, those men and women that were making those bets, and they're all prisoners in that job, and they don't have the guts, to do what this guy's doing. So there's lots of why people do something, and understanding it's just a very complex thing. And I think it's, we're all taught to kind of read faces and read behaviors. And I think in business, I think it's one layer deeper. I think it's people want to show that they're part of the tribe or they're part of the group or whatever. And they'll say that stuff to reinforce that, but really in the back of their mind, they have some other agenda. The fact that they're engaging with you at all should be a signal to you that something's up. There's some goal of this action, and my job is to kind of figure it out and make them think it was their idea. It's a real skill that I call it a skill, but it's happened in so many diverse ways, and it happens when I travel. I had a situation where I just, was having a real problem with the rental car person it wasn't the rental car, it was the airline person. Our flight took off, our connecting flight took off early, and our arriving plane had been delayed by headwinds of all things. So this person was just like reading from a script. And so I just said to him, and they were giving me my options. And so I just said, is there anything else that you can tell me about this that would help me decide what to do? And it actually was this weird guy sitting over to the side that I wasn't even talking to, spoke up and said to me, I think you can do this and this, and that will work. And he was absolutely right. It made the whole huge mess go away instantly. Because this guy who heard the conversation, now the guy that I was talking to, I had asked for a supervisor, had his hands on his hips. He's physically a larger guy even than me, and he was ready for a tough fight. That's what he was there. His job was to kick my ass, one way or the other. But I wasn't unreasonable and I wasn't disrespectful, so he couldn't tee off on me. And this other guy, watching all this, came up with a really viable and useful solution, which I never would have thought of personally. So anyway, it comes up all the time. It's a really effective human interaction tool. So, Julian, what do you think? Are you there, Julian? Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on this? Ashley or Bob?
I actually wanted to thank you for showing that video, because it's actually hard for me to let somebody tell their story without jumping in when you ask them for feedback. And
what do you mean by that, Ashley? I'm not sure I felt. No, I'm just kidding.
Thanks. I mean, case in point, right? No, it's just, you want to be relatable, and it's hard to not want to say, hey, I understand, because, and give them like a personal. So I actually appreciate her going through the what not to do.
Yeah.
I struggle with all of those.
Well, I think it's fair to say that, we're just not trained in this stuff. This is not part of school. At least it wasn't in the schools I went to.
Nope.
And particularly when you're an entrepreneur running your own business, if you really, this is my own opinion, this is my experience, but school was really designed to get you to work for a big company and don't cause problems, right? No bad behavior, be quiet, do what you're told, blah, 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 all that kind of, I was the world's worst person for that. And I had an identical twin brother who was great at that. That was really frustrating to the teachers, mostly, not to me. But anyway, we're just not taught this stuff. So I think it's really important to figure out how to learn and learn in a way. And I have found this to be really critical. And there is a line in my life between business and personal. I may do things on a business sense for a business purpose that are not necessarily, has nothing to do with me personally, right? And I don't mean to get into the weeds on this, but I think it's important to understand that not everything you believe personally really matters in your business, right? Not everything. Some things might be, some maybe, so I think it's really important to ask yourself, where am I on this? Do I feel, personally offended or personally challenged or personally threatened, or is this just business? It's, and I don't mean to minimize business, but to me, business is very different than personal, particularly if it's, something relatively small transactional. It's just not that big a deal to me to think of it differently than my own personal. I don't mean sell yourself down the river and be a total person with no character at all. I'm not suggesting that, but try to be aware of the differences between your business and your personal kind of beliefs and life, and try to put it in the right perspective and the right dose, I guess is the best way to think of it. Instead of just, dumping your bucket on every single thing that you come across, you'll be exhausted and no one will want to talk to you. So, all right. Anyone else want to jump in? Grant, you must have an opinion on this, but you can bring the young college student perspective to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you said, through school, it's all about just behaving and kind of being like every other student, which is kind of annoying, but I'm in the entrepreneurship program, so it's a little better. But again, it's still the same kind of class format where you do what you're told, you turn in assignments, and you get the grade, and then you move on. But I feel like there's so much more than that that could be taught, but it's not.
Yeah. Just to kind of respond to that, thank you, Grant, for that. When I was, so I was on the board at James Madison University for a lot of years, and they got to a place where they wanted to start an entrepreneurship center, kind of like what ECU has. And the dean asked me to run it. He said, Dennis, I just sold my company and I had the time. He goes, can you do this? And I said, yeah, I think I can do it. And it was amazing. The attitude of the professors at that time was incredibly negative about what I was doing. I had gotten Lockheed Martin to put up $75,000 for scholarships and stuff for the students. And this woman professor, who was the head of a department, pulled me aside walking down the hall and started poking me in the chest. She's just this little woman poking me in the chest, accusing me of selling access to our students to large corporations who would then steal the students' ideas. This is a company, Lockheed Martin was hiring about 25 graduates a year from the university, right? And this is what this person is saying to me. So they were so threatened by this different approach, different educational approach. And she wasn't the only one. There was a ton of people. Maybe it's just my personality. They all hated me, but I was amazed at the gap between people like that and people who were actually entrepreneurs, and the people on my board and my friends and stuff. It was like a different planet. Yeah, I mean, there just was no connection whatsoever. So, that was my experience in that case. Anyone else want to jump in before we call it a day? Okay. Let me see what we got here. So tomorrow, let me just take a look here. I booked all this while I was in London, and I booked it all at 4 a.m. I had to change all the calendars. Apparently, that's how it came out. Okay, so this is a popular one last time. Grow with KPIs, which are key performance indicators. I think you'll enjoy that. We've had some good luck with that. We even got involved with using a whiteboard at one point. I don't know if we'll get there tomorrow, but it's a very interesting way to manage your business and manage your results. And then what I think is really going to be fun, on Thursday, we're going to cover news hijacking, which we started to do. And then I think something happened. We got waylaid, but you're not going to believe how cool news hijacking is and how much it can generate revenue and business for you for free. You'll be amazed. And got some great case study, little case examples of people who hijacked the news and how they did it and what the benefit was. So that's it. Right now it looks like the class will probably end the 13th, as I'm thinking. October 13th might be the last class. I know I've missed a lot of time and I got to figure all that out. I have certain minimums I have to meet and stuff, but I think that will probably be the last class, or conceivably the first couple of days of the next week. But something like that, just in case you're wondering. And of course, hopefully our videos will, if they're not up already, they will be. As I mentioned to everybody before, please consider coming to the class again if you feel like you can get more out of it or additional information. I do try to change it every time so that it is a little bit different and tries to be responsive to the group, that has signed up. So anyway, Julian, I see your chat. Sorry, I missed that earlier. So yeah, are we still friends is great on a personal side. On the business side are we still, customer, or whatever the right word is to describe the relationship. In some cases, they may not like you, but they need your product, right? So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. If there's anything else, just reach out, and we'll see you tomorrow.